everyone, welcome back to my channel. So for today's case I'm going to be talking to you about is the kidnappings of Ariel Castro. So between 2002 and 2004, Ariel Castro abducted Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry and Gina DeJesus from the streets of Cleveland. This was in Ohio, and later held them captive in his home at 2207 Seymour Avenue in the city's Tremont neighborhood. All three young women were imprisoned at Castro's home, and this was until 2013. This was when Berry successfully escaped with her 6-year-old daughter, to whom she had given birth while captive, and contacted the police. Police rescued Knight and DeJesus and arrested Castro hours later. Castro was charged with 4 counts of kidnapping and 3 counts of rape. He pled guilty to 937 criminal counts of rape, kidnapping and aggravated murder as part of a plea bargain. He was then sentenced to life imprisonment plus 1,000 years in prison without the possibility of parole. 1 month into his life sentence, Castro committed suicide by hanging himself. This was with some bed sheets in his prison cell. Ariel Castro, who was born July the 10th, 1960, had died on September the 3rd, 2013. He was born in Dewey, Yoko in Puerto Rico, the son of Pedro Castro and also Lillian Rodriguez. His parents had divorced when he was only a child, and he moved to the contiguous United States with his mother and his 3 biological siblings. The family first lived in Exton, and this is in Pennsylvania, before settling in Cleveland in Ohio. This is where Castro's father and several other family members had been living. Castro had 9 siblings, both full and half, and graduated from Cleveland's Lincoln West High School, and this was in 1979. Castro met his girlfriend, Grimilda Figueroa, when he moved into a house across the street from hers in the 1980s. Castro and Figueroa lived with both sets of their parents until they moved into their own home, which is in 2207 Seymour Avenue. This was located in Cleveland's Tremont neighborhood in 1992. Their home was a 2-story, 1,400 square foot, 130M2, which was 4-bedroom, 1-bathroom house with a 760 square foot, 71M2 and finished basement, built in 1890 and remodeled in 1956. According to Figueroa's sister, Elida Caraballo, she said that all hell started breaking loose after the couple had then moved into their new home. Caraballo then claimed that Castro had beat Figueroa, and this was causing a breakage of her nose, ribs, arms, also caused a blood clot on her brain that resulted in an inoperable tumour. He then also threw her down a flight of stairs, cracking her skull. In 1993, Castro was arrested for domestic violence, but was not indicated by a grand jury. In 1996, Figueroa moved out of the house and secured custody of all of their 4 children. Police assisted in the move and detained Castro, but they did not press any charges. Castro continued to threaten and attack Figueroa after she left him. Figueroa filed charges in 2005 in Cuyahoga County Domestic Relations Court, which accused Castro of inflicting multiple severe injuries on her and frequently abducted their daughters. The court granted her a temporary restraining order against Castro, but it was dismissed a few months later. Figueroa then died in 2012 due to complications from a brain tumour. Friends and relatives gathered on Denison Avenue on April 29, 2012, for memorial services in her honour. Before his arrest at age 52, Castro worked on a bus driver for the Cleveland Metropolitan School District until he had been fired in November 2012. And this was for bad judgment, including making an illegal U-turn with infants and toddlers on his bus, using his bus to go grocery shopping, leaving a child on a bus while he went for lunch at Wendy's, and leaving the bus unattended while he took a nap at home. He was earning $18.91 per hour when he was then discharged. At the time of his arrest, Castro's home was in foreclosure after 3 years of unpaid real estate taxes. Castro kidnapped his victims by offering them a ride. He drove each of them to his home at 2207 Seymour Avenue. He then lured them inside, took them to the basement, and then restrained them. Michelle Knight, who was born on April 23, 1981, disappeared on August 23, 2002 after leaving a cousin's house. She was 21 years old at the time, and this was on the day of her disappearance. She was scheduled to appear in court for a child custody case that was involving her son, Joey, who was in the custody of the state. Following Knight's rescue, police acknowledged that limited resources had been spent on investigating her disappearance, in part because she was an adult, and the authorities had then believed that she had run away voluntarily due to anger after losing custody of her son. According to Cleveland Deputy Police Chief Ed Tomba, she was, quote, the focus of very few tips. Some criticized her subsequent removal from the National Crime Information Center database 15 months after she had disappeared, which made her largely unknown prior to her rescue. The Cleveland Division of Police, the CDP, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, had maintained that her inclusion or exclusion had no bearing on her rescue. Amanda Marie Berry, who was born on April 22nd, 1986. She had disappeared on April 21st, 2003, the day before her 17th birthday. She was last heard from around 8 p.m. when she called her sister to tell her that she was getting a ride home from her job, and this was at Burger King at the corner of Lorraine Avenue and W. 110th. The FBI initially considered her as a runaway. This had been until a week after her disappearance, when an unidentified male used his cell phone to call her mother. He said, quote, I have Amanda. She's fine and will be coming home in a couple of days. Berry was featured in a 2004 segment of Fox's America's Most Wanted then that had re-aired in 2005 and 2006, which linked her to Gina DeJesus, who by that point had also gone missing, and this was also in Cleveland. Berry and DeJesus were profiled on the Oprah Winfrey Show and the Montel Williams Show, where self-proclaimed psychic Sylvia Brown had then told Berry's mother, Luana Miller, in November 2004, that her daughter was dead and that she was, quote, in water. This pronouncement devastated her mother, causing her to take down pictures and give away Berry's computer. However, Miller continued to search for Berry before dying from a heart failure, and this was in early March 2006. Later on that year, on December the 25th, 2006, which is Christmas Day, Berry gave birth to a daughter. The DNA evidence has confirmed that Castro was the father of the child. Robert Wolford was a prison inmate who had lived in Tremont, and he claimed in July 2012 that he had information about the location of Berry's body. He had gone and led the police to an empty lot on Cleveland's west side, where they conducted a fruitless search. He was sentenced then in January 2013 to 4 + 1 years, 2 years in prison for obstruction of justice. Making a false report and making a false alarm, Gina de Jesus. Georgina Lynn de Jesus, born February 13th, 1990, went missing on April 2nd in 2004 at only the age 14. She was last seen at the payphone around 3 p.m. while she was on her way home from her middle school. And this was at West 105th Street and Lorraine Avenue. At the time, she was with friends with Castro's daughter called Arlene. Shortly before Gina disappeared, she and Arlene had called Arlene's mother, Grimilda Figueroa, for permission to have a sleepover at de Jesus' house, but Figueroa replied that they could not and that the two girls had then parted ways. Arlene was the last person to see de Jesus before her disappearance. De Jesus was under the impression that Castro was picking her up to drop her off home, and she trusted Castro because she was friends with his teenage daughter. No one witnessed her abduction, and an Amber Alert was not issued, which then angered her father. He said in 2006, quote, "The Amber Alert should work for any missing child. Whether it is an abduction or a runaway, a child needs to be found. We need to try and change this law." A year after de Jesus' disappearance, the FBI released a compositive sketch and a description of a male suspect that was described as a Latino male. And a description of the male suspect was described as age range between 25 to 35 years of age, 5'10", 165 to 185 pounds, with green eyes, also had a goatee and possibly a pencil-thin beard. According to the court's records, Castro was 5 feet 7 inches, 179 pounds, with brown eyes and a goatee. De Jesus was featured in the America's Most Wanted segment, which linked her to Barry. The disappearances received regular media attention into 2012. While the families held public vigils, Castro attended at least 2 of these vigils, reportedly participated in a search party, and tried to get close to the de Jesus family. Castro's son, Anthony, was a journalism student in 2004, and he interviewed de Jesus' mother for an article that was about the disappearances in the Plain Press newspaper. The police kept the investigation open and offered $25,000 reward for any information. According to Castro's uncle, his family knew the de Jesus family and had lived in the same neighborhood. Castro falsely claimed that he was not aware that de Jesus was a member of that family when he abducted her. Upon being kidnapped, Castro took Michelle Knight to the upper floor of his house, tied her hands and her feet together, and pulled her up using her hands, feet, and neck. He left her there for 3 days without any food. Prosecutors at Castro's sentencing wrote the diaries kept by his victims, quote, "speak of forced sexual acts and sexual conduct, being locked in a dark room, anticipating the next session of abuse, dreams of someday escaping and being reunited with a family, being chained to a wall, being held like a prisoner of war, missing the lives they once enjoyed, emotional abuse, Castro's threats to kill them, being treated like an animal, continuous abuse and desiring freedom. The women were kept in a locked bedroom where they were then forced to use plastic toilets that were then emptied infrequently. They were fed 1 meal a day and allowed to shower twice a week at the most. Knight told police that Castro had impregnated her at least 5 times and had induced miscarriages. Each time, through all the beatings, hitting her with dumbbells, punching her, slamming her against all of these walls. He also starved her. Knight's grandmother then told reporters that she would require facial reconstruction surgery due to all the beatings that she endured and had lost hearing in 1 year. At one point, Knight had a pet dog while in captivity, but Castro killed it by snapping its neck after it bit him while trying to protect Knight. DeJesus told law enforcement that she had been raped, but did not believe that she was ever impregnated. On Christmas Day 2006, Castro allegedly ordered Knight to assist in the birth of Berry's child, which took place in a small inflatable swimming pool, and threatened to kill her if the baby did not survive. At one point, the baby stopped breathing, but Knight was able to resuscitate her. Castro occasionally took Berry's daughter out of the house, including the visit to his mother. She called him, quote, Daddy, and Castro's mother, Grandmother. In 2013, he showed one of his adult daughters a picture of the child and said that she was his girlfriend's daughter from a previous relationship. He had told others that she was his granddaughter. Berry taught her daughter how to read and write. According to the statement from the CDP, officers visited Castro's home only once following the kidnappings, and this was to discuss any unrelated incident. Castro did not appear to be home at the time and was later interviewed elsewhere. Neighbours have said that they called the police about suspicious activity that was observed at the home, but police claimed that they had no record of any calls. Castro's son, Anthony, reported that there were certain areas of the house that were locked and was not accessible. He also mentioned on an occasion, 3 weeks before the women's escape, when Castro had asked him if Berry would ever be found. Anthony said that he could and told Castro that Berry was likely dead, to which Castro responded, "Really? You think so?" NBC-affiliated WKYC reported that Castro recalled each of the 3 abductions, and this was in very good detail, during his interrogation, and had indicated that they were all unplanned crimes and this was of opportunity. According to WKYCS sources, Castro did not have to explain the exit plan and believed that he would eventually be caught. He referred to himself as, quote, cold-blooded and a sex addict. Police found a suicide note in the house in which he discussed that the abductions and wrote that his money and possessions should be given in a kidnapped woman if he were caught. On the morning of May the 6th, 2013, Berry was finally able to make contact with Castro's neighbours. This was leading to own escape with his 6-year-old daughter and the rescue of DeJesus and the Knight by authorities. According to police, Castro had left the house that day and Berry realised that he had failed to lock the big inside door. Although the exterior storm door was bolted, she did not attempt to break through the outer door because she was then thought that Castro was, quote, testing her. According to the police report, previously Castro had tested the women by leaving the house partially unlocked and the exits unsecured. If they attempted to escape, he would beat them. Instead, Berry screamed for help when she saw neighbours through the screen. Neighbour Angel Cordero responded to the screaming but was unable to communicate with Berry because he spoke little English. Neighbour Charles Ramsey joined Cordero at the house's front door during the rescue. They kicked a hole through the bottom of the storm door and Joe Berry crawled through it carrying her daughter. Ramsey said that Berry had told him that she and her child were being kept inside the house against their will. Upon being freed, she went to the house with another Spanish-speaking neighbour and with Ramsey's assistance called 911, saying, quote, "Help me, I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years and I am here, I am free now." Responding police officers Anthony Espada Michael Tracy, and Barbara Johnson entered Castro's house. They walked through the upstairs hallway with guns drawn, announcing themselves as CPD. After peeking out from a slightly open bedroom door, Knight entered the hallway and leaped into the officer's arms, repeatedly saying, quote, "You have saved me." Soon afterward, the Jesus entered the hallway from another room. Knight and the Jesus walked out of the house, and all three women plus the child were taken to the Metro Health Medical Center. Barry and the Jesus were released from the hospital the next day, and Knight was discharged 4 days later on May the 10th. Castro was arrested in a McDonald's parking lot shortly after the victims was rescued. He was charged with 4 counts of kidnapping, 3 counts of rape on May the 8th, which carried prison sentences of 10 years to life in Ohio. 2 counts of Castro's brothers, Pedro and Ariel, were also initially taken into custody, but they were released on May the 9th, after police announced that they had no involvement in the kidnappings. The charges against the 2 brothers had then been dropped. Castro had made his first court appearance at the Cleveland Municipal Court on May the 9th, where bail was set at $2 million per kidnapping charge, adding to the total of $8 million. Prosecutors intended to seek the death penalty against Castro. Additional charges were reported to be pending, including aggravated murder for intentional indication of miscarriages and attempted murder, an assault and a charge for each instance of rape, and a kidnapping charge for each day captive and had been held. On May the 14th, Castro's attorney said that he would plead not guilty to all charges if indicated for kidnapping and rape. A Cuyahoga County grand jury returned a true bill of indictment against Castro on June the 7th. It contained 329 counts, including 2 counts of aggravated murder under different sections of the Ohio Criminal Code. For his role in the termination of one of the women's pregnancies, the indictments then covered only from the period of August 2002 right up to February 2007. The county prosecutor, Timothy J. McGinty, stated that the investigation was still ongoing and that any further findings would be presented to the grand jury. McGinty said that pursuing a death penalty specification would be considered following completion of an indictment proceeding. After entering a not guilty plea for Castro on June the 12th, one of his attorneys, Craig Weintraub, said that although some of the charges against Castro was indisputable, it is our hope that we can continue to try and work towards a resolution to avoid having an unnecessary trial about aggravated murder and a death penalty. He noted, quote, "We are very sensitive to the emotional strain and impact that the trial would have on the women, their families, and also this community." Castro was found competent to stand trial on July the 3rd. On July the 12th, a Cuyahoga County grand jury returned to a true bill of indictment for the remainder of the period after February 2007. It brought the total of 977 counts, 512 counts then of kidnapping, 446 of rape, 7 of gross sexual imposition, 6 of felonious assault, 3 of child endangerment, 2 of aggravated murder, and 1 of possession of criminal tools. On July the 17th, Castro pleaded not guilty to the expanded indictment that he faced death by a lethal injection if convicted on all charges. Castro pleaded guilty on July the 26th to 937 of the 977 charges against him, including charges of kidnapping, rape, aggravated murder, as part of a plea bargain which called for a consecutive sentences of life in prison plus 1,000 years. And this was all without the possibility of parole. Under the plea deal, Castro forfeited his right to an appeal and could not profit in any way due to all of his crimes. He also forfeited his assets, including his Seymour Avenue house, which prosecutors said would be demolished. Castro was told by Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court Judge Michael Russo, quote, "You will not be getting out, is that clear?" To which Castro responded, quote, "I do understand that, Your Honor." Castro also made comments about his, quote, "addiction to pornography and sexual problem," but that was cut off by Judge Russo, who said such issues could be discussed at the August 1st sentencing hearing. A law firm then representing Berry, DeJesus and Knight released a statement that the three women were, quote, "relieved by today's plea. They are satisfied by this resolution to the case and are looking forward to having these legal proceedings draw to a final close in the near future." At the sentencing hearing on August the 1st, Castro was then sentenced to a consecutive life terms in prison plus 1,000 years, all without any possibility of parole. He was also fined $100,000, and the court had then forfeited all of his property and all his assets. And this was to the Cuyahoga County government. Before his sentencing, Castro addressed at the court for nearly 20 minutes, in which he was said, quote, he was a good person and not a monster, but that he was addicted to sex and pornography and had, quote, practiced the art of masturbation. From a young age, he claimed that he had never beaten or tortured the women and insisted that most, quote, of the sex that he had with them was consensual. And he shifted between apologizing and blaming the FBI for failing to catch him, as well as blaming his victims themselves for getting in a car with a stranger, along with insisting to the court that when he had sex with them, he discovered that they were not virgins. He would alternatively shift back to apologetic comments saying, quote, "I hope they find in their hearts to forgive me, because we had a lot of harmony going on in that home." The sentencing judge also heard from Knight and family members of Berry and DeJesus. Knight told Castro, quote, "You took 11 years of my life away. I spent 11 years in hell, and now your hell is just beginning. I will overcome all that has happened, but you will face hell for eternity. I will live on. You will die a little every day as you think of the 11 years of atrocities that you inflicted on us. I can forgive you, but I will never forget." Knight, Berry and DeJesus released a video statement on July the 9th, 2013, thanking the public for their support. An attorney for Berry and DeJesus said that the women, quote, "still have a strong desire for privacy and did not wish to speak to the media about their ordeal. The Cleveland Courage Fund is a bank account that is set up to help all the women that was in transition to independent lives, which had collected approximately $1.5 million at the time of the videos released. Before Berry's disappearance, her grandfather had promised to give her a classic Chevrolet Monte Carlo built in the year when she was born. He kept the car after her kidnapping in case she was still found alive. He still had it for her when she was released, although it was in need of a restoration from having been unused. Several automotive shops offered to perform the restoration for free. Knight had then discussed some of her ordeals in an interview with People magazine 1 year after her release, as well as her life leading up to the abduction. Since her rescue, she legally changed her name and began to get several tattoos as a way of coping with the healing process. She also revealed that her son was adopted by his foster parents while she was in captivity and that she wanted to go to see him. But she does not want to bring him into the ordeal which she has to deal with and plan to see him after he becomes an adult. She planned to open a restaurant and dreamed of getting married, which she did in 2016, and hopes to adopt children, as the years of abuse and torture had made it unlikely for her to ever be able to give birth again. She also planned to reunite with Barry and Jesus in the future, but began focusing on getting her own life back on track. Barry and Jesus received honorary diplomas from John Marshall High School in 2015. In an interview with the WKYC, Jesus said that she was volunteering for the Amber Alert community, offering some comfort to families of the abducted children. She remains in touch with Barry and her family. In February 2017, Barry joined the staff of Fox affiliate WJW in Cleveland, where she hosts short recurring segments in which she reported missing persons cases in order to help families reunite with any missing family members. In April 2019, Barry reunited with Charles Ramsey 6 years since she was rescued, at an interview that was broadcast on WJW House Demolition. As part of the plea bargain, the house where Castro had lived and held the women captive was demolished on August 7, 2013. Knight was present and had handed out yellow balloons to spectators, which she said represented all missing children. The balloons were released before Jesus' aunt began the demolition. With a swing of a crane, the house had been completely blurred out on the street view of Google Maps. So Castro's death. Castro was found hanging from a bedsheet in his detention cell at the Correction Reception Center in Orient, Ohio, and this was on the evening of September the 3rd, 2013, 1 month into his life sentence. He was age 53 at the time of his death. Prison staff performed CPR on him before he was taken then to the Ohio State University in Wexner Medical Center in Columbus, where he was pronounced dead shortly after. The following day, Franklin County Coroner Jan Gorniak announced that a preliminary autopsy had found the cause of Castro's death, and this was to be suicide by hanging. He was later then cremated. On October the 10th, 2013, the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction released a report which suggested that Castro may have died accidentally from an autoerotic asphyxiation rather than suicide. Gorniak rejected the possibility, standing by a ruling of suicide. The report also said 2 prison guards had falsified logs documenting their observation of Castro hours before he was found dead. He was not on suicide watch at the time of his death, but had been subjected to a routine check every 30 minutes due to his notoriety. A consultant's report was released on December the 3rd, and then officially concluded that, quote, all available evidence pointed to suicide, including a shrine-like arrangement of family pictures and a Bible in Castro's cell. The increasing tone of frustration in his prison journal and the reality of spending the rest of his life in prison while subject to a constant harassment. The Ohio State Highway Patrol also reviewed the case and reached the same conclusion. Some of Castro's family members disowned him and denounced his actions and apologized to the victims and their families. In January 2014, Castro's nephew, Jeremiah J. Alisi, was arrested for and charged with 22 accounts that related to child pornography, including 21 counts of pandering sexually oriented matter involving a minor and 1 count of possessing a criminal tool. Okay then, everyone, so that is today's case. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I see you all on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.